Hello YouTube, it's Thomas again. So today I'm going to talk about cables. Does it matter? I know I'm going to get flamed. I know people are going to write comments on my channel saying that I'm an idiot for spending money on cables, on buying snake oil and so forth. Yet I still do want to make a video on it. It's because I will be talking about speaker cables or interconnects from time to time. Such as the Siltech interconnects that I've done recently. So I just want to level set with everyone to explain to everyone my position on speaker cables. So like most of you, you probably went on the internet and did your research, right? Does cable matters? There's a few YouTube videos out there that help answer my question in the very beginning. So these people will go out, buy these $10 cables, buy these $100 cables, you know which one I'm talking about, and do A/B tests with them. And I have to respect them because they actually took the time to help us out by spending money on these cables, and spend hours listening to it and to conclude that there are actually no difference. So when I look at videos like that at the beginning, it really helped me decide that spending money on cables is really a waste of time. Now, the reason why I have this is because I got it for free. So because of the YouTube videos, I didn't bother looking further into any cables at all, right? If a $10 cable and a $100 cable does not make any difference, or they sound about the same, then there's no point spending money on it. And for me at the time, $100 was probably my limit. It is already crazy for me to think that somebody would spend $100 on speaker cables. The sad part is one of my friends gave me his cables. Now he currently owns cables that are $15,000. Yes, you heard right. That's a bit crazy, of course. And he gave me these Audio Quests, Cardus, and a whole bunch, a whole box, and these coaxial cables and so forth, right? So for the first time, I got my hands on some higher end cables that are not like 10, 20 bucks. And sadly, once I tried them, that's when I realized, okay, I hear something different that my original cables can't give me. In fact, I lent these to my other friends who also believed that $10 cables were good enough. And that's when they realized also that, okay, we need to look into cables a bit more. So on the internet, you have different groups of people arguing about speaker cables. You have engineers who work for speaker cable company who argues for it, and you have engineers who argue against it, who does it for free. Of course, I understand that people tend to believe in engineers who do it out of their good heart. So, if I were to measure the amount of people not believing in speaker cables versus people who believe, I would say that most of the people out there probably don't believe in speaker cables. And then you have a different group of people who form their opinion just by common sense. If you think about it, it's just a signal from the amp to the speaker, right? And technically, anything that carries that signal across should sound the same. A coat hanger, for example, a telephone cable, for example, should do the trick. And for me, I can understand where they're coming from because it's common sense if you think about it, right? A USB cable, how can it make a difference? It's carrying digital signal, 0 or 1, right? And what we learn in school is that it's supposed to be perfect. It's digital. It's either on or off, right? So therefore, I can understand where these people are coming from. Now now you have another group of people who have actually took the time to test cables, and they simply do not hear a difference. And that's 100% fine too, because they actually took the time and they come with a conclusion that they sincerely believe in. So for me, that's why it's impossible to convince one group of people to convert to another group of people. It's almost impossible. Then finally, you have another group of people who don't believe in cables but still buy decent cables. I have a friend like that actually. He can tell the difference when we plug in speaker cables, different interconnects. He can tell me, okay, this one sounds a bit more bright and so forth. Yet he does not spend money buying speaker cables, interconnects. He has a decent set, a very entry level one, and for him it is good enough. So for me, these are people that are they do see a difference in speaker cable, but they don't see the value in it, meaning that they do not believe that cables should be so expensive. And I think that's fine as long as you are very clear about your position, right? So that's why it bothers me sometimes when I see on the internet where people say that speaker cables don't matter, and then they say all you need is a decent set of speaker cable. So if speaker cable don't matter, then why bother getting a decent set? Just get this. Save yourself $100. I think that if you're very clear that's in your position where, okay, you don't need to spend a lot on speaker cable and yet you'll get very good sound as long as you have a decent set of cables. That I can accept. It makes sense, right? Your position is clear, fine. So the question of snake oil, right? For me, really, this all the science behind it, it really does not matter because at the end of the day, I can tell you, I took these cables and I put snake oil on it. But if you can hear the difference, if you can tell the difference, then what is the problem? The problem is that you don't, it's the value, right? You know, I sprinkle $2 of snake oil on it and I'm charging you $500. However, if you can tell and you can hear it sonically, the difference, then what you're debating on or what you're questioning on or what you're against is the value, but not the sonic improvement of the cable. Now, if you tell me that you've tried them all and it doesn't, you can't hear a difference, then 100% good for you because you don't have to spend a lot of money on cables, right? But for me, it's important that we're clear in our position and why, instead of just simply saying, well, you're an idiot for buying cables. Why don't you just go buy telephone cables, electrical cables, and so forth? They all sound the same. Well, guess what? In my beginning, I did do that, right? These are custom-made cables. Some of them are actually telephone cables. Some of them are actually electrical cables. Some of them are actually coaxial cables. Because I'm cheap, right? I'm not going to spend $300 on an interconnect when I can get them for like $50. So my friend, I had a friend who, once again, I lent him my cables and he got hooked into cables. He himself went to buy all those clamp. He went online, he started ordering different kind of cables and he started building them. So us bunch, we started building our own interconnects because for us, it makes sense to save money that way. And for me, this is one of the better ways to use your money, right? If you're not very picky like me, you can build a very decent set of interconnects for very little price. Sadly, I am picky, so therefore I started experimenting with higher end cables. So when I bought this cable, I had no intention of keeping it. It's just that it was priced insanely high, and I wanted to try. Okay, so what's the big deal with these cables? And once you try them, you actually get hooked. So all these cables, eventually I'll sell most of it. I have no loyalty to any company. For me, I have only loyalty to my wallet, right? If I cannot hear a difference, if it doesn't improve the sound, I don't keep it. There's no point for me to keep it. I understand that if you live in a place where you cannot just buy and sell, then you're a lot more careful with what you buy, right? In my case, thanks to the internet, I can buy this cable at $50. I probably can sell it at $45 to $55, right? So that's why for me, I actually took the time to test a lot of cables. And it's a good thing because I can conclusively say that cables makes a difference. I spend most of my money on interconnects and on speaker cable. Power cable, I'm not really into it, even though I do hear a difference from when I swap cables. My issue with it is that sometimes, when you shut down a machine and you change cable, it sounds different. Is it because of the fact that I turn off the machine and it takes time to warm up to its optimal performance and so forth? So power cable, usually I just buy a decent set and then I'm done with it. I don't bother changing. I don't bother doing A/B tests. I just buy a decent one for the peace of mind. For USB cable, I did the same thing. I told myself, look, I'm not going to start spending time buying USB cables and trying them and reselling them. So what I did, I bought not one pair, I bought one AudioQuest Coffee And those are the ones with the batteries on it, and people laugh at it. But I didn't buy it for the battery. I didn't care about it. All I care was that I think it had 10% silver in it, and for me it was good enough. So I bought it and I plugged it in. Oh, it sounds good. Sounds okay. And but what bothered me was that when I bought it, I plugged it in with my Higo DAC. It sounds great, but there's a slight distortion. So I was thinking maybe the Higo DAC needs to break in. Okay, so I'll let it go for a while. And then one day I said, you know what? Isn't there a battery in that thing there? Let me take a look at it. There's a button to press on it to test for the battery strength, and the battery was dead. And because I'm into also camera gears, I actually have the extra battery. So I say, you know what the hell, I change it. And then that distortion that was bothering me is almost 100% gone. So does it make a difference, the battery and so forth? To be honest, I don't care. I really don't care. All I care is what I hear, right? You can explain to me the science aligning the photons or whatever. Seriously, like, doesn't really matter. What matters for me is what I hear, right? So that's why I find debating about it a bit silly. Just try it. Just test it. If it doesn't make a difference to you, then it doesn't. That's the end of it. There's no point trying to convince somebody else it sounds different when they can't hear it, right? And the good part is that I tried it. Look at that. I mean, this is a fraction of it. I have like boxes over there, and which I will sell eventually. For me, you just need 3 sets of cable. One to tame the ultra bright speakers. One is your reference cable that you will use 80% of the time. And then one set for maybe you need a bit more mid-range or a bit more bass or something like that. So 3 sets of cable is good enough for me. There are times where I get speakers that are overly bright that my reference cable just can't handle. It's just not the right match. So if I believe in cable so much, can I pass a blind test? And sadly, not all the time. Now I know I'm being a hypocrite for saying that, right? But if you play long enough with cables, you'll know that there are a specific signature, a specific group of sound, specific type of sound. I'll put it that way. For example, if I were to take this is audio sensibility. It's a silver cable, and I were to compare it to this one. This is silver and platinum together. I am not confident that I will pass the blind test every single time. However, if I were to take this and then compare it to this, see this? This is hard, it's coaxial, right? Completely different kind of sound. Then I'll be confident that I'll pass the test every time. Just like this one here. This is a coaxial type of speaker cable. It's very, very hard. I hate them. It's just like I have to bend them, and look, I even broke them already somewhere. Yeah, there we go. So these cables are very rolled off. They collapse the sound stage, but they're great for speakers who are very harsh and very bright. So if you were to tell me, Thomas, can you tell for certainty every single time if I swap the cable? I would say yes if I compare it to this, for example. This, right? But if I were to compare it to this cable, then not necessary. However, just because of the fact that you can't pass a blind test doesn't mean that you can't tell there is a difference, right? There are times when I would change cables and I forgot about it. So I'll come down, I'll listen to it for after an hour, I'll go like, something just doesn't feel right. And then I take a look at my system, then I realize, oh, I changed that speaker cable yesterday. So at this level, a lot of these cables sound very good already. So that's why it's possible, that's the reason why I don't pick it up like that, right? And some of these cables, you really have to go into deep meditation to hear the difference. And for me, that's why it doesn't make sense to keep, let's say, this and this. If the difference is very close, then there's no point keeping it, right? But as I mentioned, I would accidentally change the cable. I'll listen for about an hour, then I realize something is not right. It just doesn't feel as smooth as I'm used to. And then I'll take a look. Oh, okay. So, okay, I changed the cable yesterday. So did I pass a blind test? Yeah, after an hour, right? Um, so speaker cable, I can understand why it's very debated, um, and I don't pretend to say that it is very black and white. I'm also being a hypocrite at the same time, saying that I can't pass the blind test all the time, but I know for sure there is a significant difference between cables. So I guess I'll end the video with a question, right? If you look on the internet and you start uh, grouping people, right? The only bunch of people that I found changed opinion are those who don't believe in speaker cable and then they become a believer. It's never the reverse. I used to be a believer in speaker cable and then I revert back to the $2 cable. You'll never find that. You'll find the other way around. So the question is, why is that?